circle. I was doing work, sitting in the cul-de-sac, contemplating murder. Swerving with my circus, looking for a purpose. Pseudo clean record, hope got another surface.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Culper's Canteen Cup. This is episode 12. We titled it, One Flynn Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I want to give a shout out. Culper's Canteen Cup is internationally known. And we'd like to thank our international listeners in Slovenia, Ireland, Iceland, Germany, Japan, United Kingdom, the great country of France with their freedom fries. And we got a few others. We've got South Korea, Taiwan, India, Netherlands, and Australia. So we appreciate all of you listening. I want to give a specific shout out to Jed Moorhead and his wife, Allison. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all the personal comments. Mark Wingfield and John Hackler. We'll get around to thanking all of our listeners. That'll probably take about 3 episodes, right, guys? We're going to talk about Michael Flynn, Obamagate, Russiagate, Ukraine, all that stuff. And as we know, Josh is really worked up about this. So I think the best thing is to kick it over to him and let him just scorch your face with his anger.
Thanks, Luke. So it's got me a little worked up. I was doing some research, putting together notes for the show, and the more I did research and the more I, really, started digging into this, the more it pissed me off. Right. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of run through the timeline for some folks that might not be up to speed on it. So, we all know on December 22nd, 29th of 2016, then, incoming national security advisor to the Trump administration was Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, right? So everybody knows, Mike Flynn's background, former director of DIA, he was a J2 at JSOC, came along with Stan McChrystal, basically perfected the art of hunting and killing human beings in Iraq. He was a J2 when we killed Zarqawi, right? So, December 22nd, 2016, Mike Flynn talks to Sergei Kislyak, the Russian ambassador to the United States, on the phone, right? And so part of that, one of those conversations was about settlements in Israel, and then the other was about the sanctions that the Obama administration had levied on, against Russia for their interference in the 2016 election. And Mike Flynn told Russia, asked Russia not to escalate, for the sanctions, either don't respond at all or, just respond in kind, which was later determined to not be an issue for those out there who don't understand how that shit works. Right. So January 5th, 2017, there's a meeting in the Oval Office. You've got National Security Advisor Susan Rice, President Obama, Vice President Biden, Sally Yates, and who was then the Deputy Attorney General. And then you have FBI Director James Comey, right? So that's when Obama specifically asked about Flynn, which was surprising to Sally Yates because she had not heard about the phone call yet, which is kind of interesting when you think about it, because you would think that the Deputy Attorney General would have heard about that prior to the president. And, why would the president be asking about it and the Deputy AG not knowing? But everybody else in the room was already fully briefed. And we'll get into the unmasking piece of that later. So February 13th, 2017, Flynn resigns. You have May 17th, same year, Rod Rosenstein, he appoints Mueller as a special counsel to look into election interference and collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, and so we have, a whole year, we're really 3 years after that, where we have, fucking political hacks like Adam Schiff and, the usual suspects pushing this Russian collusion narrative, which, after an extensive investigation by Bob Mueller, has proven to be, a big, fat, juicy, well done, nothing burger. But here's the part that kind of gets me amped up. It was the handling of Mike Flynn. It's how they did it, right? So on January 24th, when Peter Strzok and this other fuckstick FBI agent go over to interview him, P-Strap, they coordinate directly with Flynn. Now, why is this weird? Because Flynn is a member of the administration. Protocol says that any interview of any administration, the Bureau will coordinate through the White House counsel, but they didn't. Why? Don't know. Comey says that, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here from some of his quotes. Comey says, "Well, there's a new administration settling in. We really didn't understand who was who. There's some bullshit in there, so we just sent them over, right?" So they go in. They don't Mirandize Flynn. They don't tell him, hey, anything you say can be used against you. Where they go in and basically without legal counsel, and this is on Mike Flynn, like that's his fault. Like never talk to the FBI, never talk to any type of law enforcement entity, like that without your attorney present. That's just bad business to do it without him. Even after Comey said they should have gone through the council and he should have had legal counsel there, but it doesn't fucking matter after you ruin the dude's life and give him $6 million in legal bills, and he's got to basically sell his house, empty out his bank account. So they go in and they interview Flynn. Now they already had the transcript of the calls between Flynn and Kelsiak, right? So they already know what they say. It's important to note prior to this that the counterintelligence investigation into Flynn in December of 2016 Jim Comey had already directed that it be closed, but Peter Strzok said, no, don't close it, right? And what was his, he was Crossfire Razor or some shit, right? So
Hurricane.
So Crossfire Hurricane was the overall investigation into the Trump-Russia collusion.
Oh, yeah.
Flynn specifically was codenamed Crossfire Razor, right? So they go in, they interview. Strzok didn't want it closed. He wanted it open. So they go in, and the pretext of the interview, I don't know I can't remember what it was, but they talk to Flynn, and they come back, and then in December of that same year, Mike Flynn pleads guilty, right? And so here's where it starts getting weird. Everybody's like, then like the news media exploded, right? It was like, oh, Mike Flynn's pleading guilty. He's turning state's witness. This is the end for Trump. The walls are closing in on Trump and Russia collusion. Everybody was buying it, right? They got Mike Flynn to turn state, right? And that was going to be the end of the Trump administration. Well, if you start digging into the conduct of the FBI and how they did Mike Flynn in the aftermath, is absolutely fucking mind-boggling how people have not been indicted and are not in jail right now. And that's the part that super, super absolutely fucking pisses me off, right? So we'll start with the 302s. So after an interview is done, the agents go back and they are instructed to do a 302. So in our business, it would be like your IMFR, right? You get done with, an interview, you go back, you type up your IMFR. Right.
IMFR, that's investigative memorandum
for record, right? So you go back, you use your notes, and you type it up. Well, what's weird is Comey said that they did it. He testified before the House Intelligence Committee that it was the same day P-Strap and Strzok went back and typed up their 302s. Well, in text messages between Strzok and Lisa Page, who was then the attorney counsel to Deputy Director McCabe, right? It wasn't completed for 3 weeks. And the text messages between Strzok and Page were, and I quote, hey, you gave me a steaming pile of shit. Like, what is this? This is not even remotely correct. So it went through, quote unquote, numerous and heavy edits, right? Lisa Page said that I had to edit it extensively. Now, here's a question. Why is an attorney who is, one, not present at the meeting, and two, not an FBI agent, editing a 302? Why is that? Right? Now, the FBI can't find P-Strap's original 302. They can't find it. They can't find. There should be 3 different versions, right? The original one that P-Strap wrote, which Strzok in his exit interview told the special counsel when, after he got fired for misconduct, told the special counsel, no, man, P-Strap typed up the initial 302. I edited his, right? So there should be the one P-Strap wrote, there should be the one Strzok edited, and there should be the one that Page edited, right? So there's 3 versions out there. You know how many of those 3 versions that the FBI can find right now? Fucking 0. None of them, right? This is the document based on their notes that was supposedly used and presented to Sullivan, the judge in the Flynn case, to go ahead and bring the charge of lying to the FBI. And you know what else hasn't been released? The DOJ refuses to release the fucking call, the transcript between Kilsiak and Flynn. Nobody's seen the transcript. Nobody's seen the 302s. And now we know by the notes that were released, P-Strap's notes, what was the goal of the interview on the 24th of January, 2017 of Flynn after the counterintelligence investigation had been recommended to be closed? Well, let's see if we can get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired. I didn't know the FBI conducted investigations to get people fired. That's weird. I don't know. I got a lot more shit to say, and my blood's slowly starting to heat up. So I'm gonna kind of just throw it out there to Roger, because I don't know. Roger fucking thinks it's all politics and it's okay or some shit. I don't know.
Hey, thanks for reading my mind, Josh. No, I think with this, there's several different issues at hand, and it goes bigger than just the Michael Flynn case. Okay. I think when you go back to the whole, because let's face it, this was all based on Trump, right? President Trump, he won. People can't believe it. President Trump is, he's the president, and everybody's like, hey, Hillary Clinton was supposed to be the anointed one and all this good stuff, and nobody can believe that he won. So it's doing whatever they can to get him out of power, which is what we see today. The overarching atrocity, me personally, okay, just set Flynn aside, and this is part of it, but one, let's talk about the FISA court. Right. So the FISA court, for those that don't know, basically, all your court stuff, for the most part, is all public record. Anybody can find it. And it gets published. You can do FOIA, freedom of information requests and that type of stuff. The FISA court is basically for sensitive or classified issues. Right. And primarily that regard, American citizens and some of our rights that don't necessarily need to be made public. Right. Because it's in the conduct of an investigation. It's acts that need to do, investigative acts that need to happen. That don't necessarily need to be made public. The FBI lied to a judge, right? And I guess, I say lied. You can say they omitted information. They stretched some truths. They made some, illogical leaps. But, my eyes, they lied to a federal judge to give the U.S. government the right to spy on an American citizen. Okay. And I tell you this is, to me, and I've been saying this for years. I know I've been bitching to you guys for years. This comes out, everybody gets wrapped around the axle with everybody else, and I'll get to Flynn in a minute. But that's the big thing. It's like, man, this goes back to like McCarthy days, right? I mean, that you were using the same thing, and this is not a political thing. All right. I mean, we all know where we all lie, but if the Republicans did this, I'd be just as pissed off. The U.S. government, an arm of the U.S. government, lied to a judge that, from what and I get it, now it's all rhetoric and anecdotes. Everybody's saying, well, hey, if we'd have known all this evidence, we would have never granted, the authority to do this stuff. But they lied to a federal judge to go spy on Americans. Okay, and I think you need to put that in perspective. And that's me, you, the listeners out there. Imagine that your local police, your sheriff, the FBI, take it all up the chain. They lie so they can spy on you. Right. And then I think, as Luke brought up, several times through conversations before, hey, you give any branch of the government unlimited time, unlimited resources. There is not an American out there who's not committed a prosecutable crime. Right. I mean, you've got the full weight of the U.S. government. We're going to find something. They're going to find something to prosecute you over. Right. So I think that's what takes me to the, more specifically with the Flynn case. Flynn, it's I'm a little all over the place because, the 302s, I really don't have an issue with legal counsel with the editing of the 302s. We see it with IMFRs all the time. It depends on what's being edited. All right, because a lot of times you have to go through there, and I've had, IMFRs edited, the memorandums for record that, hey, we really need the facts here. We don't really need your opinion. So you really have to see the edits, what's actually being edited. I never really had an attorney do that for me. Normally it's like your special agent in charge or what have you. But, that I don't have so much a problem with. Where are the 302s? It's like, really? I mean, today's age, right? I mean, I guess they're sitting on a server with Hillary's emails somewhere. I mean, we can find everything except for Hillary's emails and the 302s for these interviews. Those are like the two things, that and Jimmy Hoffa. Those are the three things right now that we cannot find in the world is Jimmy Hoffa, the 302s, and Hillary's emails.
If that was the only thing that was wrong with the Flynn case was that, hey man, we can't find the 302s.
Absolutely.
Right. They're in the fucking break room under the burn bag, right? Or whatever. Like, then I would say, okay, not an issue. But with all the other things wrong with the Flynn case, no, fuck that. You're not getting off on the 302s. And the judge, Sullivan, said, hey, documents get lost. It just happens. And that is a direct motherfucking quote. Try that the next time that you fucking investigate somebody for espionage, and you come up short with the interview notes where the dude says, yeah, fuck it, I did it. Be like, oh, sorry, man, I just lost the notes. All right, we're gonna go ahead and convict this guy. It's like, oh well, fuck, where's the admission? It got lost. It just happens. It's such a that's such a fucking cop out.
Well, and you go back to Comey in the transcripts, if I remember correctly, Comey said the call was fine.
Yes.
And I believe he wasn't the only one. I think there were several folks within the government that said, after looking at the transcripts, right, because it wasn't just phone calls, it was also text messages. And I kind of said it tongue in cheek earlier today to Luke and Josh, it's like, well, hey, where's the Russian version of the transcript? Because, they were listening as well, right? How come that hasn't made it out there? But, they've all said, hey, yeah, the call was fine. I didn't see anything wrong with it.
And this is so this is where the prosecutor in the case, Brandon Van Grack, the dude should be fucking disbarred for malfeasance and fucking ethics, right? So this dude has provided so much evidence. He told Sullivan, prior to Sullivan's, rendering of his, everything. Hey, you know what? We've turned over all our Brady, required documents. The government has not suppressed evidence. Okay, well, we know that shit was false, right? Sullivan held that the DOJ comms are not material and favorable in a sentencing, right? Well, the DOJ conspired to use the Logan Act, right? And everybody knows what the Logan Act is. If you don't, it was some obscure act passed in 1799 that no one, not one fucking American citizen has ever been prosecuted on, right? And if you're going to say Flynn violated the Logan Act, I'm going to say John Kerry would like a fucking word with you, okay? Sullivan turns around. All right, so the evidence shows and proves this was not a perjury trap. Okay, well, Pre-Strap's notes absolutely fucking prove it was a perjury trap because the direct quote was fucking, let's see if we can get him to lie so we can prosecute him on something, right? Because your counterintelligence investigation yielded nothing. Mm-hmm. If he would have actually broken the law on the phone calls with Kilsiak, they could have had that. They would have used that. They wouldn't have tried to entrap him in a perjury trap on some bullshit interview that wasn't material to the investigation to begin with. Yeah. And then you have, Sullivan's, his false statements are material to the FBI and, to the Russian inquiry. No, it doesn't. Because in the notes, again, in FBI documents, they said, we're going to try and get him on a Logan Act. We're going to try and get him for perjury, right? So no, it wasn't. It was not material to the Russia-Trump collusion fucking farce that you guys have perpetrated. I'm telling you right now, if nobody goes to jail over this, we are done as a republic. We are fucking done.
So Luke, what did Michael Flynn? What did he end up pleading guilty to?
It was, I'd have to look back through it. I think I don't know why you put me on the spot like that. I was thinking about something else. Right?
He pleaded guilty.
Yeah, I mean, he said, I said, yeah. Well, if you look at it, he said something like, well, I didn't remember the call that great, but yeah, I guess I did lie about it. But I mean, there were circumstances with that too, like why he pled guilty. I mean, I pled guilty to a traffic ticket in San Antonio that I absolutely know I did not do what that cop said I did. But you know why I pled guilty? Because it got me out of the situation. It was the most efficient way to get myself out of the situation. It was cheaper. And at the end of the day, it's my word against the cops, and who's going to win that one? So, all these people that I hear saying, oh, well, he pled guilty. He pled guilty. He's guilty. It's like, come on, man. Have you never had a traffic ticket? Really?
He pled guilty to a Title 18 U.S. Code 1001 lying to a government agent. And because of the call, just like you said, it was like, it was like, hey, man, that was a call from a year prior, and it was, well, I don't remember, any paraphrase. He was like, the best I can recall, maybe, right? The same shit that they got Roger Stone on, well, the best I can recall. How many people have sat in front of Congress under oath and be like, well, from what I recall, right? I don't have, nobody's got a perfect memory. From what I recall, that's what they got him on. Title 18 USC 1001, lying to a government agent.
You know what you guys are, Josh started out at like the 1,000 foot view. Then Roger kind of took it up to the 10,000. It got me thinking about the 30,000 to bring back down. Right. And this is what has been griping me. Roger, you said Flynn is just a particle of fallout from the entire Russiagate thing. Let me enlighten. Right? Yeah. Let me enlighten everyone who doesn't know. I mean, I've been doing this for a little while. So have Josh and Roger. Not only that, but I read a lot. I've always found that, the Cold War fascinating, how the KGB operated, how, the CIA and the MI6 and 5 went after the Russians. They went after each other. Well, let me enlighten you. Okay. Was Russia tampering with our elections? Yes. Russia has tampered with every one of our elections. You go back and they finally they didn't finally break the code. They've done a good job over the years with different countries. We've done the same thing. It's called active measures. It's foreign influence, trying to get a desired result. And the way the Russians do that, they're the best in the world at it. They are the best in the world. They have no rules. They're light years ahead of us, and we are always in react mode against the SVR and the GRU. SVR is the old KGB. So when I say SVR, I think KGB. Their goal in meddling with our elections is to turn us against one another and undermine our faith in the process, undermine our faith in the system, in the republic, in the supreme law of the land. And guess what? They absolutely succeeded. And hey, newsflash, if we have any Hillary Clinton supporters out there who think that she should have won, if she would have won, we would be in the same type of scenario right here with someone accusing, Hillary Clinton, she had the Russians working for her against Trump, because we all know what Trump would have done against Russia. They absolutely succeeded. We will see this in the future. And we'll see it in the future. It's going to keep happening. Now, going down to Flynn, Josh was hitting on it. He said the counterintelligence investigation wasn't turning up squat. The problem I have with the FBI and the way it's currently structured, and we can kind of thank Mueller for this, the way it's currently structured is that they can just put on their law enforcement cap. And when law enforcement isn't turning anything up, well, let me put on my counterintelligence hat now with different authorities and stuff like that, and I'll just bounce back and forth between the two. Now, I have some experience in counterintelligence, and I can tell you counterintelligence investigations in this country are something we need to be very, very careful with, because the ability for an agent to fudge the facts, lie, get a FISA, all this stuff, and really take advantage of the privacies are, almost incalculable if there's corruption. So that's the problem I have with the FBI. Yeah, the counterintelligence investigation wasn't going anywhere, so let's put on our law enforcement cap, and vice versa. They did that like 4 times during the Flynn thing. If you look through the timeline of how they executed the investigation, they flip-flop back and forth. I think that's the big problem I have. And another news flash for the audience, I can't, this is where I'm like, well, I don't know, the Republic's in big trouble, is you've got the FBI doing J. Edgar Hoover type shit here. It is absolutely a tool for politics. This whole thing proves it. Trying to get him fired, that is not, I'll echo Josh, that is not a law enforcement thing. That is a political thing. So, that's my little soapbox there. And I've got more, but Josh looks like his head's about to, there's beads of sweat forming on the top, and there's it's insane to me that people are not more pissed off.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's like one of our friends, Dave, Big Dave, is like, hey, you know what? Where's the rage? Where is it? Where is the rage? Are we that numb to this as a society? Are we too far gone into our 240 character worlds that people are just simply don't care about this shit? Because you think about what the FBI, the powers that come with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, right? You think about, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world, the best resourced law enforcement agency in the world. When you exercise your own personal political motives, using those powers are vast. Those powers are incredibly vast. And people are like, well, it didn't happen to me. Dude, if they can do it to a retired 3-star, one of the most popular fucking generals in the Army, during his time, if they can do it to him, just imagine what they can do to fucking Joe Sixpack. Imagine what they can do to you. And people don't.
Joe Sixpack and his ex-wife Karen, who took half his shit in a divorce, they don't think it will happen to them because they're not important enough. This is only happening to General Flynn. This is only happening to people who are in the political realm. I agree with you, Josh. I'm just saying that's the disconnect. Not only is it complicated, but they think, well, I'm not in that world and I don't do anything wrong anyway. So what do I have to worry about?
All right. Well, Joe Sixpack better put the fucking natural light down and step outside his fucking single wide in Apache Junction, Arizona, and wake the fuck up. Because I'm telling you right now, this is just the beginning. Because what's to say the next president that comes in, whether they be Republican or Democrat, what's to say that they say, well, fuck it, nothing happened to the last crew that did this, so I'm going to do this too. And then where are we? Benjamin Franklin got asked when he walked out of Independence Hall, what kind of government do we have? Hey, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. We are on the precipice of completely fucking losing it, and nobody cares. Nobody fucking cares.
Why don't they care, Roger?
I tell you this. So when you look at Mike Flynn, and I'm curious, Luke, on your thoughts on this. One, you were probably guilty of what you got pulled over for, you were a traffic ticket or whatever. So you can use this podcast as an outlet to express your innocence. But do you think it was that? Because that's apples and oranges, right? I mean, that is. I don't think that analogy. When you go from you being caught speeding to former lieutenant general, director, DIA, DNI, and then I'm just going to plead guilty to a perjury charge. I mean, do you honestly think that? Well, I just pled guilty to a perjury charge because that was the easy way out?
Of course not. And Deputy Sanchez, just outside of Lavernia, Texas, was absolutely dead wrong. I did use my turn signal.
So why did he plead
guilty? No, that's not what I'm saying. Look, I'm saying that people plead guilty all the time to get out of bigger trouble. That doesn't mean they are guilty. So I'm making a point in all the Twitter. But yes, Roger, I know what you're getting at there. Flynn, if you look through, he was no saint. He really wasn't. I mean, and he did not make a whole lot of friends because of stuff he was doing on the side. He had his own little agencies. He was talking to Turkey. He was, I saw the unmasking, all the people who requested that. And I was like, why did some people, what would be the possible justification for the assistant deputy for Department of Energy to look at this? So, I'm going through Wikipedia. I always look at the sources on Wikipedia. And apparently Flynn was talking to Saudi Arabia about some nuclear stuff, nuclear exchange, something to get around the foreign disclosure with nuclear stuff. So I guess that person might have had a reason to, want to be unmasked. He had a lot of stuff going on with Turkey that I think he was definitely in the wrong. And yeah, I don't know what his son was up to either. That's one thing. People say, "Where's Hunter?" Where's Hunter Biden? Well, where's his son?
Right. And I think with the Flynn thing, I mean, and this is part of the problem. You said it. Flynn was no angel, and one doesn't justify the other, because I completely agree with both you and Josh. Right, with everything with the FBI and the government and this and that. The problem is, and though it's not right, doesn't justify it. Flynn does not help himself. All right, you look at the positions that he's held, and one, I mean, he lobbied for the Turkish government when they were going after the Turkish cleric, right? He was collecting intelligence. And, at the time, obviously, we've had issues with Turkey going back to the 90s, right, with the use of their airspace, use of their air bases. It's always been a very, touchy subject depending on who's in office. But, here's the thing. You got the former director of the DIA. And, oh, by the way, and I think this plays a part in it, even though you don't see it. His lobbying firm never registered as a damn foreign lobbyist, which brings its own penalty, right? So you've got the director. And this is the thing. Again, one has nothing to do with the other, but it doesn't help his cause. You can't tell me it's like he didn't know. It's like, really, dude? You retired as a lieutenant general, director of the DIA, and you didn't know that I know for a fact he knew that, right? That's part of the outbriefing with these guys. I know dealing with some of these other folks that are in the same boat. So you go work for a foreign government, collecting on an individual who's in the United States, by the way, who may be on the other 50% of where our interests are lying, and you don't even take step 101 to even properly register as a foreign, which by the way is another $250,000 fine, 6 months. But again, it's like the Logan Act, right? Has anybody actually been prosecuted for that? I don't know, probably not. But that's what hurts, my opinion of all this. Totally agreeing with you guys, but it's like, man, there were so many missteps that he took, and his son was involved in all of this. Okay, and that's the thing is, obviously he didn't play a prominent role, but family business. It's the Flynn Intel Group brings his son in. But man, you don't even take the basic steps to help yourself out, of all this. So, and then that's how they get him on perjury, because I think in the background of it, they say, well, hey, you actually did, because he finally did register as a foreign agent or, a foreign lobbyist after the fact. I'm not even sure how that works, because I know with ITARs, right, to export stuff to foreign governments, I don't know if you can actually go back and say, yeah, I know I sold nukes, but now I'm going to register and I'm covered with all that. So I'm sure a lot of that stuff played into that as far as him pleading guilty to, the perjury charge or lying to a federal agent or what have you. But it's, for me, not looking at them as separate entities, separate subjects, he just doesn't help himself, man, at all.
No, he doesn't help himself, and so he got about $500K from Turkey, right? So it's into the Flynn Intel Group, is his consulting firm's name, and that was surrounding that cleric in Pennsylvania that Turkey wanted back. So absolutely, Flynn does not help himself, but at the end of the day, Flynn was never charged with failing to register
absolutely
as a foreign, right? So then if they want to take him to court on that, absolutely take his ass to court on that. Because some questions should be raised on that. You like you said, you're the former director of Defense Intelligence Agency, and you're doing business with a foreign government. We should probably know what the fuck you're doing business with.
And why not lawyer up? You said it. Why not lawyer up?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely insane, man. The FBI ever comes to ask you questions, any law enforcement entity ever comes and say, hey, man, we need to ask you a few questions. Be like, I don't know what this is about, but here's my lawyer's phone number. Feel free to contact him, right? I don't care. It's like, hey, no, man, we just wanted to know where some good restaurants were in town. Fuck you, talk to my lawyer.
Which doesn't justify the actions of the FBI. But I think all of us, right, former investigators, I would probably go in with the presumption that this individual is going to lawyer up. And would probably be shocked that, come on in, let's sit down and have a chat. Wait,
it's a dream. That's a dream.
I'm not even prepared for this, right?
But apparently when McCabe called Flynn to set up the meeting, McCabe told Flynn, no, we just got some questions about some other folks. It was never told to Flynn, right? And granted, you're not going to tell somebody over the phone yet. No, man, I'm coming to talk to you about crimes you may have committed, right? I'm not going to tell you that. But at the end of the day, man, Flynn should have known. So it absolutely had to do with his son. So in March of 2018, there were emails between the prosecutors and the court and Flynn's then lawyers. I forget the law firm, but it was from CMB as the initials of the law firm. Right, they were talking about they mentioned Michael Jr. Right, so Mike Flynn's son carries the same name as his dad. So they absolutely talked about Mike Jr. Flynn pleaded guilty to keep his son from being prosecuted, right? Because the threat from Mueller, from the special counsel, was that basically if you do not help us, we are going to drag your son into court. Right. And so Mike Flynn being a dad, being a father, said, OK, I'll take one on the chin and whatever happens. I just don't want to see my son get drug into this. But here's where here's the other issue. Right. So one more issue, one more oddity to add on to this whole thing with Flynn is when you read Flynn's plea agreement, where he pleads guilty to Title 18 USC 1001, lying to a federal government agent. Nowhere in there, when he pleads, does he state the stipulations, did the government lay out, hey, we will, for your cooperation, we're not going to prosecute your son, right? Even though there's email traffic between his lawyers at the time, the ones he fired before he went to Sidney Powell, and, the prosecutors. The prosecutors do not relay this to the judge, right? So why is this important? It's important because Giglio versus U.S. 1972 Supreme Court case requires all terms of any plea agreements must be disclosed to the judge and any potential jurors. Why? To maintain a fair trial. This was never disclosed. The terms were never disclosed to Sullivan, right? They just gave it, the one that Mike Flynn signed and was like, here you go. Well, apparently Mike Flynn did not sign that personally. Apparently his lawyers signed it for him, right? And so that kind of led to the issue between him and his initial law firm, lawyers that he was using. He fired them, right? And then went and retained Sidney Powell. But again, the conjecture behind that not being in there was also that they weren't going to outline it because the hope at the time was that Flynn was going to be used to testify against other people, in the, whatever the special counsel dug up. And what they didn't want the jury to say, okay, well, why did Flynn plead guilty? Well, he's just trying to protect his son. Oh, okay. That paints Flynn in a good light, shows him, being a good dad, however you want to look at that. And so they kept it out of that, right? So again, another step by the U.S. government, by the FBI in this case. It's riddled. You cannot convince me that this shit goes to trial and he's convicted because there's beyond a reasonable doubt. Even Comey, when they asked Comey at the House Intelligence Committee, do you think, how did you come up with that he lied to a federal agent? Comey said, quote, it was a really close call. Really? It was a really close call. So the burden of proof is on the government, right? The burden of proof is on the government, on the state, whatever. But it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. And it was so close that it was like, man, really go either way. But when it's political, you don't need that. You don't have to worry about the rules. You don't have to worry about the laws. You just inject your own political viewpoints and your political interest to it. And then you just go out and fuck whoever you want to, because that's where we're at. And again, I go back. Nobody gives a shit.
You look at the Flynn thing, and I think the thing that scares me the most about it, and I brought up the FISA thing, and Luke, you brought up some good points. That's I think a later segment in this podcast. But my worry with the focus on Flynn right now is it's fodder to cover up a lot of other things. One, I think the biggest thing, FISA, right? That to me is my biggest atrocity that we started out with. Here's the other thing that's kind of gone. It's kind of this. You're starting to see it a little bit on Fox News and a couple of these other media outlets. What about President Obama, right? In December, January, first telling, the incoming President Trump not to hire Flynn, because everybody, you got to remember that President Obama fired, General Flynn. Strategies weren't in line, and that's his right. That is the president's right. No issues with that. But you go to the incoming administration, say, hey, you shouldn't hire this guy. But then even bigger than that, Obama telling the holdovers into the new administration that you might want to withhold some information to the incoming president. So now that takes me to the bigger thing. Who, and this goes with everybody, right? So even like the Logan Act, you talk, whose foreign policy are we pushing here? Right? I mean, to me, the way I understood it, the incoming president, whether it be Democrat, Republican, Independent, or whoever, they dictate the foreign policy, and everybody else, serves at the pleasure of the president. And I'm not talking about Congress, obviously, right? But the cabinet and all of those folks serve at the pleasure of the president to push his agenda, what the voters elected him and the Electoral College elected him or her to do. So when the current president, who's getting ready to go on the way out, says, hey, some of you folks that are going to be kept on here, yeah, you might want to choose to withhold some of this information. Dude, that I mean, maybe that's even greater than That could be bigger than the FISA violations, in my opinion.
I agree completely. I mean, of course, like in the absence, you guys have worked with State Department before, and the transition period is an interesting time, because it's like, okay, we know the foreign policy is going to be a little bit different, but they operate on certain assumptions, right? The foreign policy just doesn't change the day the president is inaugurated. But, that's not against your point to Roger. It's more to it. It's like, man, Trump says the deep state a lot, and I wish he didn't say that. I wish he'd break it down in more realistic terms, but there is no doubt about it. I mean, I've been pretty politically astute for the past 20 years, actually, and I've never seen an active effort against a president's foreign policy or internal, domestic policy like I have with this one. I've never seen that in the military. Not really. I've heard guys, whisper in the corner they didn't like this president. I've heard it about Trump. I heard it about Bush. I heard it about Obama and Clinton. But I've never seen commanders actively working, against a president's defense policy, even in the interim. So, one thing I'd like to touch on, and I'm going to kick this over to you guys because I don't want to say anything wrong about it, if you know what I mean. Who wants to enlighten our audience as to unmasking? Because that is one of my concerns, because the unmasking, there's a lot of holes in that. If you look down the timeline, they unmasked it, but it was only this one phone call. And people hear a lot about unmasking. So which one of you guys wants to tackle that question? So, what is it? Just explain it real briefly for the layman.
All right. Well, I'm going to try and do it real briefly, but I got some notes on unmasking too. So unmasking, right? So unmasking is we obviously monitor, certain folks' phone calls outside the United States, even within the United States, foreign citizens, and people that we think may be of interest for whatever reason. Inadvertently, U.S. citizens sometimes get caught up in that, and so. It could be something as simple as, dude, a wrong phone call, whatever. So when in intelligence reporting, it comes out and it just says U.S. person. It doesn't have a name or anything like that. Depending upon your position with the United States government, you can request, based on, your need to know and your position, you can request that be unmasked to where you can actually obtain the name and the identity of that U.S. person. So that's unmasking in a nutshell. It's important to note, right? So everybody lost their mind when John Bolton sent requests to unmask people. John Bolton, in 4 years, John Bolton requested 10 times for unmasking, just 10, right? And every time John Bolton did it, people lost their minds, especially the left. The left lost their collective shit. Valerie Plame unmasked. People lost their shit. 39 Obama officials sent unmasking requests. Sent 54 unmasking requests for Flynn in the span of 2 months. In the span of 60 days, 39 Obama officials requested 54 times to unmask Flynn. Joe Biden, vice presidential candidate Joe Biden, who said that he didn't even know there was an investigation going on, sent a request to unmask Flynn the week before the inauguration. Now, what did you send that for? That wasn't for some type of action. That was something that was for purely political. That was purely political.
8 days, right? It was 8 days before
8 days before the inauguration. Here comes fucking creepy Joe. He took a break from sniffing little girls' hair and sent an unmasking request for Flynn. For what? And you know what? Crickets. Nobody. Everybody turns around and looks at him like, "Oh, Flynn pleaded guilty."
Sent the request to unmask him 8 days, which, I mean, we've all changed jobs. He moved around. What are you doing 8 days before you change jobs, retire, quit, move on, right?
I'm at home.
My shit. It's F the world, right? It's party time. I'm drinking bourbon at noon. So 8 days. And I think, Josh said this last week when he was showing, he sent us a text on the unmasking list, which is on the news everywhere. And I didn't really catch the last page, because it was 3 pages. And then he brought it up. And I'm just like, wow, man. I mean, can you be any more blatant? 8 days prior, you request the unmask, and then now he's like, I didn't even know there was an investigation going on. Well, then why'd you request to unmask the name?
The ambassador to the United Nations requested. What does the ambassador to the United Nations have to do with a counterintelligence investigation?
I don't know.
It's fucking nuts. It's absolutely fucking nuts. Hey, I just want to apologize to my mom and Luke's mom for my language.
Hey, it's after Mother's Day, so we're good. It fires you up because we've been fired up. And for the canteeners and canteenies out there listening, we in our off times, this is what we bitch about. We sit here and we text, and we all three of us read a lot, right? And it's not that we're any smarter or dumber or whatever. This is kind of in the line of work that we've done for our career. So this is what we're very in tune to. And I think you see the erosion of rights, not just with COVID, but the political process. And it's it fires you up. It makes you so frustrated because, going back to Big Dave and what Josh said, people should be pissed. People should be pissed off and fired up. Now, granted, Flynn doesn't help himself. His son doesn't help himself, but that's a separate issue. You want to prosecute him or bring up charges for not registering as a foreign lobbyist, then go do that, right? But it doesn't excuse the actions of the FBI. It doesn't excuse the action of former President Obama. It doesn't excuse the actions of Biden at 8 days says, I want to know this guy's name. I mean, what possible reason could you have for doing that other than it being politics? And then let's take it a step farther, right? Because now, and you touched a little bit on it, Luke, I think before, talk about, Judge Sullivan and his amicus brief. So the Department of Justice, and this brings me to I'm not even sure why I sent. The more we talk about this, and I'm more thinking out loud, but it's like, one, all of this stuff could be put to an end. I think the president could just squash it all and be done with it, right? But you have Judge Sullivan that after the Department of Justice says, hey, we're not going to prosecute, Mike Flynn, Judge Sullivan's like, not so fast. So now he's asking about, asking for the amicus briefs, which, is quote unquote friends of the court. So, and this is what he says. The amicus has an interest in some other case that may be affected by the decision in the present case. Okay. And then when I started reading a little bit more into it, you know what he's talking about? Russian collusion.
Oh my God.
That's what he's talking about. Which is already done, right? Because remember, Adam Schiff, I have concrete evidence. We heard that shit for 2 years, right? But when you read into his statement, so at first, because I had to look into it, I didn't understand what that meant. The amicus has an interest, the friends, right? Friends of the court has an interest in some other case, not Flynn, some other case that may be affected by the decision in the present case. So we're not going to throw his case out, which I don't even know how that works. So I guess he says we're going to continue to go forward, and DOJ says we're not prosecuting. So I don't know if the judge just says, hey, you're guilty, right? But they have an interest in some other case. And so I had to look at it and say, what does that mean? And they're saying, hey, there's actually still some fallout going on from the, quote unquote, Russian collusion case. And they're scared to set precedent because what they do with this case may impact any, quote unquote, Russian collusion charges that come out.
How many crossfires do you think there are? You guys have been on ops before. There's one overarching op, Crossfire Hurricane. There's Crossfire Razor, Sword, Hammer, Scalpel. How many of those do you think are going on right now? And if you're a straight up FBI agent, right, who's been in for 12, 15 years, and you get reassigned to DC in the counterintelligence unit, and now you're reassigned to clean up one of those crossfires, and you're a straight up dude. I mean, how do you deal with that? If I'm walking into that, I want to be as far away from it as possible. And this is what I think the three of us were talking about it the other night. My faith in the federal law enforcement right now is at an all-time low in my entire life. At the same time, I've worked with some really good FBI agents in the past. So I'm not labeling them all with a broad stroke. But like I said earlier, Mueller consolidated it all, and that might not have been a bad thing. It was probably the right call back then after 9/11 to consolidate it all at headquarters, easier sharing, all this stuff. But that has a tendency to grow into a Leviathan, just an unwieldy Leviathan, where all the power is centrally located. And it's just right now, I don't have a lot of faith in the system. I'm a little bit like Josh in that respect.
I think at this point, with the FBI, right, and there are good folks in there. There are hardworking, mom, flag, apple pie Americans that are, trying to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, at the top tiers of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, it is corrupt. It is to the point to where you need to just salt the earth with that organization, and you need to start over. And you either allow that organization to retain both law enforcement and CI authorities, or you separate the two. Right. We've seen on the Army side, the separation of, law enforcement versus counterintelligence. Right. And not only does that keep you from, going down the same road that the Bureau has gone down, but it also keeps each other honest. That criminal agency, is not going to be able to step across the hall and all of a sudden put on their CI hat and use CI authorities, to continue to, do some sort of, to continue their malfeasance and vice versa for the CI guys. I think the right thing is having them separate, the separation of powers. We've gotten to the point to where we've allowed some of these agencies, Department of Homeland Security, Coast Guard. The Coast Guard, being up under DHS, has immense powers, right, here in the States. Do they need those? At the end of the day, we have to step back now at this point, and this should be a wake-up call for a bunch of people, but it fucking won't. To step back and look at, what is in our best interest, our security or our liberty. Right. Like you said, it goes to, it speaks to COVID-19. It speaks to all these things. And we are surrendering so much of our liberties for some security, for just some perceived security. And I don't care who the person is, unless it's Abraham Lincoln or George Washington. When you put immense power in the hands of man, it will corrupt them. It will corrupt anybody. It will corrupt any one of three of us. To a certain extent, some people more than others, but it will corrupt you in some capacity, way, shape, or form. And we are allowing that to happen. We are sitting here fucking watching it. People are too busy burying their goddamn iPhones, just sitting there worried about what the fucking Kardashians are doing, or worried about, their neighbor who's going out to fucking Harris Teeter and not wearing their mask. They're more worried about that shit than the fact that, their liberties are being eroded and fucking stripped away from them by the hour, and nobody fucking cares.
Well, and I think, as we sit here and talk about it, I think this is part of the reason why we have such a huge problem with this, us three specifically. So for the listeners out there that aren't as in tune with as far as Army counterintelligence and, Air Force OSI and the Navy, criminal investigation. So the Army, we separate the two. We separate counterintelligence from law enforcement. So you have Army counterintelligence and you have, Army criminal investigation division, right? So they deal with your typical law enforcement. Well, every other service, the Air Force and the Navy, they combine them into one. And as we sit here and we talk about this, it's funny because I remember specific conversations in the Army where we have, certain counterintelligence investigations going on. And I will tell you this, even at the lowest levels, it always comes up. Well, hey, we didn't really get anybody on the CI aspect, but if we were like NCIS, the Navy, or OSI, Air Force, we could absolutely get them on some law enforcement aspect of this. That's the scary piece of it. And I think, we take some of that and that applies. That's what makes us so angry on this, because you see the FBI, good gosh, man. I served 22 years in the Army, and Josh did 20 plus years, and Luke, I think Luke's a vet as well. It is extremely frustrating because, man, I love this country, and I tell you, when you look at, our president, there is a lot of people don't like Donald Trump. I get it. A lot of people don't or didn't like George Bush, but I will tell you this: I'd never ever question their patriotism. And I never, ever questioned that every action that they took was what was best for the United States of America, right? Yeah. Not the WHO, not the UN, not NATO, not saying you don't have friends and this and that, but when did it becoming, nationalism, right? When did that become a bad word? Right now, obviously, I know when it became a bad word, but why? Why is it a bad word? Why is putting America first? Why is that bad?
It's not inclusive, Roger. You know that. Now, it's funny. I was telling maybe it was Josh or another colleague of mine that you made a really good point, Roger. I think people's hearts have been in the right place for a long time. You look at Iran-Contra. I've done a lot of reading about Iran-Contra over the years, and I'm like, I remember when I was a lot younger, I was like, well, what'd they do wrong? I don't get it. I don't understand. You know, they broke a law that Congress had passed a month before to keep them from doing what they wanted to do, and they just went and did it anyway. But if you look at Reagan, they were all trying to do the right thing, you know, and
right.
you know, that's just changed along the way. Now, you know, Roger, I'm sorry, I stumbled on one of the questions you asked me. You know, I would have done more research and been better prepared for this podcast, but this week I was too busy designing my new Facebook avatar and ordering some Tony Couture face masks.
Hey, you got to have priorities.
So real quick, Josh, closing thoughts, kick it around and then close it out.
People better wake up. People better absolutely wake up and start caring, or we're going to turn into, you know, we are, it will be the balkanization of the United States.
Absolutely. You know, get educated, folks. I mean, get educated, and, you know, and it's, I'm going to go on my little rant here, my closing thought that's totally unrelated, but kind of related. So my son, God bless him, graduated high school yesterday, right? First step for hopefully bigger things. But this is how effed up it is, right? With all this COVID stuff going on. So he had a virtual graduation. That's not live streamed. You drive up to the high school, you drop your kid off, your kid goes in there, they videotape him or her walking across the stage. They do that for every single student. And then a week later, they're going to parse all these, you know, these walks together, and they're going to email you the link to the video. And then you pick up your boy, like we did. We picked up our boy when he got done and walked off, right? And they do it in the interest of public safety and public health. Not to mention that we had Coachella across the street this weekend with 2,000 kids show up for a party, right? Or the Home Depot or the Lowe's. And I live in Arizona. Hey, man, restrictions were lifted Friday. Why are we doing this? But you know what? What kills me, and I was furious. I sent an email to the school district and to the principal. I know it fell on deaf ears, and I know I'll never get a response. But it goes back. This is where I bring it around to what Josh just said. Why is nobody else bitching? Why am I the only one, right? We've got like 500 kids graduating. Why am I the only parent, myself and my wife, that are disturbed by this? Everybody else is on board. Hey, man, it's COVID. It's COVID. It's just the way it is. No, it's my tax dollars, right? Every teacher can be there to watch my kid walk, but I can't be there. And you know what? Not to go down the road, but you know, obviously there are a lot of measures. If you're really worried about it, you let immediate family in, mother, father, brother, sister, put them in the back, wear a mask, do that, right? We'd have done that. But the bigger point is going back to what Josh said. People have given up their rights, and they don't even know they've given up their rights. Like, I can't go into a publicly funded building, education, right, that I pay for along with the rest of this community to watch my son that, oh, by the way, my tax dollars go and pay the salary for everybody who's sitting in this building, but I can't go watch him graduate. It pisses me off. I know it's a rant, but it goes back to what Josh said. You know, people are giving up their rights and they don't even know it, or even worse, they don't care.
I agree. I totally agree. We go back and do a whole other Corona one about, you know, people don't even realize what they're giving up. And by the time they realize, it's going to be too late. I agree with both of you guys. Agree with Josh, his rants. Sorry about the language, Mom. Sorry about the language, Mrs. Brown. But I think Roger did a good job. He doesn't need to apologize to his mom on this one. We appreciate y'all listening to this rant. Please direct your comments. If we weren't clear on something, you don't understand, any one of us will be glad to fill you in as far as how we see it, and maybe a little bit of the history, or at least point you to some resources. We love fielding questions, and we really like the feedback. You know, go to iTunes, go to Spotify, go to your favorite platform, Anchor, Facebook, Instagram. Please like us, share it with other people. That really helps us out a lot. Appreciate y'all listening. Thanks to Carlton Zeus for that intro music. And until next time, keep your canteen cups full and tightly secured.